I'm Melissa Warren, 37, and I never imagined I'd be planning my daughter's funeral while simultaneously discovering my sister's true nature. The text message from my sister Karen glowed on my phone screen. Sorry, but I'm not changing my housewarming date. Your thing is just a minor event compared to my first home purchase. I stared at those words, minor event, to describe my 16-year-old daughter Sophie's funeral, as tears streamed down my face and my world continued to crumble around me. Before I continue with this story that changed my family forever, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below and hit that subscribe button if you enjoy real family drama stories with unexpected justice. Trust me, what happened next in this family betrayal will shock you. Now, let me take you back to how it all started. 2 weeks before that devastating text message, my life had been completely different. Sophie, my beautiful, vibrant daughter, had just received her driver's license after months of practice. She was responsible, cautious, and so excited about this new milestone. That Friday afternoon, she had called me at work, her voice bubbling with excitement about her solo drive to pick up supplies for her art project. "Mom, I'll be super careful, I promise. I'll text you when I get to the store and when I leave," she had assured me, knowing my maternal worry. I had trusted her completely. She was always the responsible one. At 4:37 p.m., I received her text, "At the store. Love you." I replied with a heart emoji and continued with my meeting. By 6 p.m., when there was no follow-up message, a knot formed in my stomach. I called her phone repeatedly, straight to voicemail. That's when my office phone rang, and the police officer on the other end spoke words that instantly changed everything. "Mrs. Warren, there's been an accident involving your daughter's vehicle." The next few hours passed in a blur of hospital corridors, doctors with grim expressions, and medical terminology that my shock-addled brain could barely process. Sophie had suffered catastrophic internal injuries when a drunk driver had T-boned her car at an intersection. Despite the medical team's desperate efforts, my beautiful, promising daughter slipped away at 11:42 p.m. that night, with me clutching her still warm hand, begging her not to leave me. My ex-husband James, who had moved to Chicago after our divorce 5 years ago, caught the first flight back. Despite our differences, we collapsed into each other's arms in the hospital hallway, united in our unbearable grief. We spent that night in my living room, looking through photo albums, sharing stories about our daughter, and trying to comprehend how we were supposed to live in a world without her. The morning after, I had to start making funeral arrangements, something no parent should ever have to do. The funeral home director was compassionate as he guided us through choices no parent is ever prepared to make. What outfit would Sophie be buried in? Open or closed casket? What music would be played? Each question felt like another dagger to my heart. As word spread about Sophie's passing, my phone began flooding with messages of condolence. Friends, teachers, Sophie's classmates, all sharing beautiful memories of my daughter. Among those messages was a brief text from my sister Karen. "So sorry about Sophie. Let me know when the funeral is." Karen and I had always had a complicated relationship. 3 years younger than me, she had always competed for attention, always needed to be the star. When we were growing up, if I achieved something, Karen would quickly find a way to overshadow it. But I had always attributed it to normal sibling rivalry. Surely, in a tragedy of this magnitude, such petty competitions would be set aside. I called her that evening, my voice breaking as I filled her in on the details. We had set the funeral for Saturday, 10 days away, to allow distant relatives time to make travel arrangements. "Oh," Karen said, her voice suddenly flat. "That's the same day as my housewarming party." I was momentarily speechless. "Well, obviously you'll reschedule," I finally responded. "I've already sent out invitations," she said. "Can't you move the funeral to Sunday?" The funeral home had limited weekend availability, and Sunday was already booked. Besides, I couldn't believe she was even suggesting this. "Karen, this is Sophie's funeral we're talking about. I understand that, but this housewarming is really important to me. It's my first home purchase, and I've been planning this for weeks. All my friends have already confirmed." I ended the call shortly after, telling myself she was just in shock and would come to her senses. Grief affects people differently, I reasoned. She'd call back tomorrow with an apology. But the call never came. Instead, 3 days later, as I was picking out the flowers for my daughter's casket, I received that text message that would fracture our family forever. Sorry, but I'm not changing my housewarming date. Your thing is just a minor event compared to my first home purchase. I read the message multiple times, convinced I must be misunderstanding. How could anyone, let alone my own sister, refer to the funeral of my child, her niece, as a minor event? I showed the message to James, whose face darkened with anger. Call her, he said. There must be some misunderstanding. But when I called Karen, she doubled down. Look, I know you're upset, but you need to see this from my perspective. I've been working toward buying this house for 5 years. All my friends have arranged their schedules around this date. I can't just change everything because of bad timing. Bad timing? I echoed, my voice barely a whisper. Karen, Sophie is dead. My daughter, your niece, is dead. And I'm sorry about that, really I am, she replied, her tone suggesting anything but genuine sorrow. But life goes on, Melissa. You can't expect the whole world to stop. Karen's callous words created immediate shock waves through our extended family. When our parents, who were driving in from Arizona, heard about Karen's decision, they were appalled. Our father, typically the peacekeeper in family disputes, called Karen immediately. This is unacceptable, I overheard him saying, his voice uncharacteristically stern. You will reschedule your party, or you will no longer be welcome in this family. Karen's response must have been equally unyielding, because my father's next words were, then you've made your choice. Our mother tried next, pleading with Karen to show some compassion, reminding her of the times she and Sophie had spent together, the summer trips to the lake house, the Christmas mornings, the school plays Karen had attended. But Karen remained unmoved. Mom, I've put down non-refundable deposits, she argued. And I can't help that Melissa chose the same date. Why is her event more important than mine? That question, comparing a teenager's funeral to a housewarming party, stunned my mother into silence. When she hung up the phone, she looked older than I'd ever seen her, the lines on her face deepened by disappointment. I don't recognize the daughter I raised, she whispered, holding my hand tightly. News of Karen's decision spread quickly through our extended family. Aunts, uncles, and cousins who had been planning to attend Sophie's funeral began calling me, expressing their disbelief. Many were faced with an impossible choice: attend their grandniece's/cousin's funeral or risk alienating Karen by declining her housewarming. My cousin Ellie, who had always been close with both me and Karen, tried to mediate. Maybe there's a compromise here, she suggested gently over coffee. Perhaps Karen could delay the start time of her party until after the funeral. But when Ellie approached Karen with this suggestion, she was met with hostility. You're taking Melissa's side, Karen accused her. It's always been that way. Poor Melissa, everyone has to accommodate her. Ellie was taken aback. This isn't about sides, Karen. This is about a family coming together during an unimaginable tragedy. My housewarming is at 2 p.m. The funeral is at 11 a.m. People can attend both if they want to, Karen insisted. What Karen failed to consider, or perhaps didn't care about, was that Sophie's funeral would be followed by a graveside service, and then a gathering at my home for close family and friends. There was no way anyone could attend both events unless they left the funeral proceedings early. Meanwhile, as this family drama escalated, I was still trying to process the loss of my daughter. Each night, I found myself wandering into Sophie's bedroom, sitting on her bed and breathing in the fading scent of her perfume from her pillows. I'd look at her wall of photographs, Sophie with her friends at the beach last summer, Sophie proudly holding her debate team trophy, Sophie and me making silly faces at the camera during our mother-daughter trip to New York. James had temporarily moved into my guest room to help with arrangements and to simply be near the space where Sophie had lived her too short life. Despite our divorce and our shared grief, we found a new understanding of each other. One night, as we sat on the porch looking at the stars, something Sophie had loved to do, James brought up Karen. I never understood the competition she always felt with you, he said quietly. Even at our wedding, the way she had to make that toast all about her accomplishments. She's always been that way, I replied. But I never thought she'd take it this far. I never thought she'd disrespect Sophie like this. As the day of the funeral approached, the family remained deeply divided. Most had chosen to attend Sophie's funeral, but a few, including Karen's husband Tom and his family, and a couple of cousins who had always been closer to Karen, had decided to go to the housewarming instead. The most painful decision came from my 85-year-old grandmother, who lived in a nursing home 2 hours away. Her health was fragile, and she could only manage one outing. She called me in tears. "Melissa, darling, I don't know what to do," she said, her voice quavering. "I want to say goodbye to sweet Sophie, but Karen is saying I'm the guest of honor at her housewarming, that she's naming her reading nook after me because I taught her to love books." The manipulation was clear, but I couldn't bring myself to influence my grandmother's decision. "You need to do what feels right for you, Grandma," I told her, even as my heart broke a little more. The night before the funeral, I received another text from Karen. "Just so you know, Mom and Dad are stopping by my housewarming after the funeral. They agreed it's important to support both daughters." When I called my parents to confirm, they vehemently denied this. "We would never," my mother said, appalled. "We're coming straight from the cemetery to your house." It was then I realized that Karen wasn't just being insensitive, she was actively lying to create more drama and division within our family at the precise moment when we all needed unity the most. This wasn't just a thoughtless action, it was calculated cruelty. The morning of Sophie's funeral arrived with a gentle rain fitting, as if the sky itself was mourning. I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, dressed in black, barely recognizing the hollow-eyed woman staring back at me. James knocked softly before entering, his own eyes red-rimmed from another night of grief. "The cars will be here in 30 minutes, he said quietly, adjusting his tie, the one Sophie had given him last Father's Day with little paintbrushes printed on it, a nod to their shared love of art. As we waited, my phone buzzed with a notification. Against my better judgment, I looked. It was a social media post from Karen. "So excited for my housewarming today. Can't wait to show everyone my dream home. #NewBeginnings, #DreamHome. She had even tagged several family members who I knew were attending Sophie's funeral, as if taunting them for their choice. James saw my expression change and gently took the phone from my hands. "Not today," he said firmly. "Today is about Sophie, not Karen." He was right, of course. I took a deep breath and focused on the photograph of Sophie we had chosen for the funeral program, her sitting on a rock by the lake last summer, the sun creating a halo around her blonde hair, her smile wide and genuine. That was how I wanted to remember her today. The funeral home was already filling with people when we arrived. Sophie had been loved by so many, her classmates, her teachers, neighbors, family, friends. The outpouring of support was overwhelming. My parents stood at the entrance, embracing each arrival, their faces etched with the unmistakable pain of grandparents who had outlived their grandchild. I was touched to see Sophie's debate coach, Mr. Reynolds, who had flown in from a conference in Seattle. Sophie's best friend Emma and her parents had created a beautiful photo collage that they placed near the guest book. Even Mrs. Gonzalez, our elderly neighbor who rarely left her home due to mobility issues, had made the effort to come and pay her respects. The ceremony itself was both beautiful and unbearable. Sophie's favorite music played softly as people shared memories of her. Emma spoke about their 13 years of friendship, from kindergarten playground adventures to their plans for attending college together. Sophie's English teacher read a poem Sophie had written just last month, a piece about finding beauty in unexpected places that now held even more poignancy. When it was my turn to speak, I wasn't sure I could do it. But somehow, standing there with James's supportive hand on my shoulder, I found the strength to share stories of my remarkable daughter, her compassion, her wit, her determination. I spoke of how she would leave little encouraging notes in my lunch when she knew I had a difficult day ahead, how she volunteered at the animal shelter every Saturday, how she was already researching colleges with strong environmental science programs because she wanted to help heal the planet. Throughout the service, I couldn't help but notice the conspicuous absence of Karen and those who had chosen her housewarming instead. My grandmother had ultimately decided to attend Sophie's funeral, but she looked conflicted and worried, no doubt concerned about the backlash she would face from Karen. After the church service, we proceeded to the cemetery for the burial. The rain had stopped, and a weak sun struggled through the clouds as Sophie's casket, adorned with white roses and sunflowers, her favorites, was lowered into the ground. Each person placed a single flower on the casket before a small handful of earth. The finality of that moment, watching the earth cover my daughter's casket, brought me to my knees. James and my father helped me back to the car as I sobbed uncontrollably. We had arranged for a gathering at my home afterward, a celebration of Sophie's life where people could share more informal memories and find comfort in community. The caterers had set up a buffet featuring all of Sophie's favorite foods, including the chocolate raspberry cupcakes she had always requested for her birthday. As people began arriving at the house, my phone started buzzing incessantly. At first, I ignored it, but when my mother's phone began ringing as well, we knew something was happening. My cousin Rachel, who had been the first to arrive at my house, pulled me aside. "You need to see this," she said grimly, showing me her phone. Karen had been posting live updates from her housewarming party throughout the funeral service. But what had caused the current flurry of messages was her most recent post, a video tour of her new house with a caption that read, "So glad most of the people who really matter chose to be here today." Family is about supporting each other's happy moments, not just the sad ones. In the background of the video, prominently displayed on her mantle, was a family photo that included Sophie. Karen had positioned it to be visible in her home tour, using my deceased daughter's image as a prop for her social media moment, even as she had refused to honor Sophie's memory by attending the funeral. The blatant disrespect left me speechless. James, seeing the post over my shoulder, muttered an uncharacteristic curse. My father, always the calm one, turned and walked out of the room, too angry to trust himself to speak. My mother, however, did not remain silent. In a move completely out of character for her typically private nature, she picked up her phone and called Karen, putting the call on speaker. "Karen, this is your mother," she said, her voice trembling with barely controlled rage. "I have just seen your social media posts. How dare you use Sophie's photograph while simultaneously disrespecting her memory? How dare you suggest that the people who chose to honor your niece's life somehow don't really matter?" Karen's response was defensive and dismissive. "Oh, come on, Mom. It's just a family photo. And my post wasn't directed at you guys specifically. You know exactly what you were doing," my mother replied. "And I want you to know that your father and I are deeply ashamed of the person you have revealed yourself to be." As my mother ended the call, the room had fallen silent, everyone uncomfortably aware of the family drama unfolding on this already painful day. But something unexpected happened next. Sophie's friends, one by one, began sharing more stories about her, deliberately shifting the focus back to celebrating her life. Emma pulled out her phone and showed us the secret Instagram account she and Sophie had created for posting funny animal videos they found. The debate team members recounted Sophie's legendary rebuttal that had won them the state championship. A shy boy I barely recognized revealed that Sophie had tutored him in math every Thursday after school, refusing to accept any payment beyond his promise to pay it forward someday. In those moments, surrounded by people who truly loved and valued my daughter, Karen's cruelty began to feel smaller, less important. Sophie had touched more lives in her 16 years than Karen likely would in a lifetime of self-centered existence. Still, as the gathering continued, I couldn't help but wonder how our family would ever heal from this betrayal. What I didn't know then was that Karen's actions that day would set in motion a series of events that would eventually bring about a reckoning none of us could have anticipated. In the weeks following the funeral, I tried to establish a new normal, a concept that seemed impossible without Sophie. Each morning, I'd wake up and for a brief, merciful moment, forget that she was gone. Then reality would crash back, and I'd have to find the strength to get out of bed all over again. James had returned to Chicago but called daily, both of us finding comfort in sharing our grief. My parents had extended their stay, sleeping in Sophie's room despite my mother's tears each night as she lay surrounded by her granddaughter's belongings. Karen, meanwhile, had doubled down on her position. When confronted by various family members about her insensitive behavior, she portrayed herself as the victim. "Everyone's attacking me just because I didn't put my life on hold," she complained on social media. Melissa always gets all the attention and sympathy. This revisionist narrative infuriated those who had witnessed her callousness firsthand. My cousin Ellie, usually the family diplomat, finally lost her patience and publicly commented on one of Karen's posts, "No one is asking you to put your life on hold. They're asking you to show basic human decency toward your sister who lost her child. The fact that you can't see the difference is deeply concerning." Karen's response was to block Ellie and anyone else who challenged her version of events. She began curating an echo chamber of supporters who either didn't know the full story or who, like her, lacked basic empathy. About 3 weeks after the funeral, I received a large envelope in the mail. Inside was a housewarming invitation with a handwritten note. "Since you missed the party, I'm having a second gathering this Saturday. You should come see the house your jealousy kept you from experiencing the first time. Karen." The sheer audacity left me speechless. I showed the invitation to my mother, who had been about to return to Arizona with my father. "That's it," she said, her voice uncharacteristically hard. "I've tried to understand. I've tried to make excuses for her behavior. But this is beyond anything I can rationalize." My father, reading the note over her shoulder, nodded grimly. "We raised her better than this. I don't know what happened to her, but this isn't the daughter we thought we knew." Their disappointment was palpable, and in some ways, it was almost harder to witness than their grief. Parents shouldn't have to reckon with the moral failure of their child, especially not while mourning another. That evening, as my parents packed for their return trip, my mother made a decision. "I'm going to see Karen before we leave," she announced. One last attempt to reach whatever conscience she might still possess. "Do you want me to come with you?" my father asked. "No," she replied firmly. "This is a conversation between a mother and a daughter." The next morning, my mother drove to Karen's new house while my father and I had coffee on my porch, both of us silently wondering what was being said. When my mother returned 2 hours later, her expression told us everything we needed to know. "She wouldn't even let me in," my mother said, her voice hollow. Said she didn't need to be lectured, and that if I couldn't be happy for her achievements, I wasn't welcome in her home. My father wrapped his arm around her shoulders as she continued. I told her through the door that we wouldn't be sending the check we'd promised as a housewarming gift, the one to help with her new furniture. She just laughed and said she'd already forged your signature on it, Dad, and deposited it last week. My father's face paled. "That's not possible. I keep the checkbook locked in my desk." A quick call to their bank confirmed the worst. A check for $5,000 had indeed been cashed, with a signature that resembled my father's, but wasn't quite right. Karen had apparently stolen a check during her last visit to their home before Sophie's accident. "We need to report this," I said immediately. My father hesitated. "She's still our daughter, despite everything." "A daughter who stole from you and forged your signature," I pointed out. "Dad, this isn't just family drama anymore. This is a crime." After much deliberation, my parents decided to report the fraud to their bank, but not to press criminal charges. A compromise that left all of us uneasy. The bank agreed to investigate the forgery, and my parents placed a freeze on their accounts before departing for Arizona the next day. I'm not sure what I expected to happen at this point. Maybe some reflection on Karen's part? An apology? Regret? But what came next shocked even me. 3 days after my parents left, I was scrolling through social media during my lunch break at work, my first week back after bereavement leave, when I saw that Karen had created a fundraising page. The title made my blood run cold: "Help Karen Recover from Family Financial Abuse." The description was a masterpiece of manipulation. After achieving my dream of homeownership, my family has turned against me out of jealousy. They've now falsely accused me of theft and frozen assets that were promised to me, leaving me unable to furnish my new home properly. Any support during this difficult time of family betrayal would be deeply appreciated. She had included photos of her empty rooms with sad face emojis and created a wish list of expensive furniture pieces. Most appallingly, she had tagged mutual friends and extended family members, many of whom had attended Sophie's funeral and knew exactly what had transpired. I sat at my desk, hands shaking with rage and disbelief. This wasn't just insensitivity anymore. This was calculated defamation. She was publicly accusing our grieving parents of financial abuse while attempting to profit from her own theft. I immediately called my parents, who were as stunned as I was. "I never thought she would go this far," my father said, his voice breaking. "To publicly lie about us like this. I'm calling a family meeting," I decided. Everyone needs to know the truth before her lies spread any further. I wanted to take a moment to thank you all for listening to this story so far. The support from this community has been incredible during one of the most difficult chapters of my life. If you're finding this family drama as shocking as we did living through it, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to hear more real-life stories of family betrayal and eventual justice. Now, let me tell you what happened next, because this is where things started to really unravel for Karen. I spent the next day reaching out to every family member I could contact, explaining the situation and inviting them to a video call that weekend. The response was overwhelming. Aunts, uncles, cousins, even my grandmother's nursing home agreed to help her join the call. Only a small handful declined, those who had already aligned themselves firmly with Karen. I also contacted James, who immediately offered to fly back to support me. "This isn't just about Karen anymore," he said. "This is about protecting Sophie's memory and your parents' reputation." The night before the family call, I received an unexpected visitor. Tom, Karen's husband, stood awkwardly on my doorstep, hands shoved in his pockets. I hadn't seen him since before Sophie's funeral, and his presence surprised me. "Can we talk?" he asked, his expression troubled. I invited him in, curious but wary. Tom had always been quiet, overshadowed by Karen's more dominant personality. We sat in my living room, where Sophie's photographs still covered every surface. "I'm sorry about Sophie," he began, his eyes lingering on a photo of her from last Christmas. "I wanted to come to the funeral, but Karen was insistent about the housewarming. I noticed you didn't stop her from posting that fundraiser," I said, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Tom winced. "That's actually why I'm here. I didn't know about it until it was already up. We've been having problems. Ever since the house purchase, Karen's been different. More demanding, more focused on appearances." He pulled out his phone and showed me their bank statement. "We could easily afford furniture. The mortgage isn't even that stretched. This fundraiser isn't about need, it's about attention." "That's always been Karen's currency," I replied. "Yes, but it's getting worse. When I confronted her about the fundraiser, about lying about your parents, she just said perception is reality, and that she was controlling the narrative." Tom shook his head. "I don't even recognize her anymore." "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. "Because I'm worried about how far she'll go," he admitted. "And because I found this." He pulled out a small notebook from his jacket pocket. It was hidden in her desk drawer. I was looking for the checkbook to pay bills and found it instead. The notebook was filled with Karen's handwriting, lists of grievances against me dating back years, plans for one-upping me at various family events, and most disturbingly, a page titled Sophie's Sweet 16, with notes about how to make Sophie's upcoming birthday party all about me instead. "Sophie's birthday was next month," I whispered, my hands trembling as I held the physical evidence of my sister's pathological jealousy. "There's more," Tom said quietly. "Turn to the last few pages." There, in Karen's neat handwriting, was a draft of a social media post announcing her miracle pregnancy after years of trying, scheduled to be posted the day after Sophie's funeral. There were notes about how this new life would help everyone move on from the tragedy and how she would need everyone's attention and support during this difficult time. "Is she actually pregnant?" I asked, stunned by the calculation behind such a plan. "No," Tom replied firmly. "We haven't even been trying. This would have been a complete fabrication." I sank back into my chair, trying to process this new level of manipulation. Why would she do this? I think she can't stand not being the center of attention," Tom said slowly. "Even in a tragedy, maybe especially in a tragedy, she needs the spotlight." Are you going to leave her? I asked directly. Tom looked down at his hands. I've already consulted a lawyer. I wanted you to know before everything blows up. And I wanted to ask, when it does, can we still be family? Your parents, you've always been good to me. His vulnerability touched me. Of course, Tom. None of this is your fault. After he left, I added his revelations to my notes for the family call, knowing they would only strengthen the case against Karen's distortions. I also contacted my parents again, warning them that Tom might soon be leaving Karen and that things were likely to get messier before they improved. The family video call the next day was emotional but productive. Nearly 30 relatives joined as I methodically presented the evidence of Karen's behavior, from her minor event, text about Sophie's funeral to the forged check to the fraudulent fundraiser. Several family members shared their own recent experiences with Karen's manipulations. Our Aunt Patricia revealed that Karen had told her I had forbidden family members from attending her housewarming, when in fact I had never said any such thing. Cousin Rachel shared screenshots of Karen claiming that I was using Sophie's death for attention in private messages to mutual friends. The most damning testimony came from my grandmother, who tearfully explained how Karen had called her repeatedly before the funeral, claiming that I had said terrible things about her and that the only way to prove her loyalty was to attend the housewarming instead. I almost fell for it, my grandmother admitted. But something didn't feel right, so I called Melissa directly. When I realized Karen had been lying to manipulate me during such a tragic time, well, that's when I knew something was deeply wrong with her. By the end of the call, the family had reached a consensus. Karen's behavior had crossed too many lines, and collective action was needed. We agreed on several steps. Publicly countering her fundraiser with the truth, supporting Tom if he chose to leave, and perhaps most painfully, implementing a family-wide boundary with Karen until she acknowledged her actions and sought professional help. My uncle Robert, a psychiatrist, suggested that Karen's behavior indicated some serious underlying issues that went beyond normal sibling rivalry. This level of manipulation, especially involving a child's death, suggests a possible personality disorder, he noted carefully. She needs help, not enabling. The call ended with a commitment to stand united and a plan to meet again in 2 weeks. As difficult as it had been to lay bare all the painful details, there was something cathartic about the shared understanding and support. For the first time since Sophie's death, I felt like I wasn't fighting this battle alone. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly news of our family meeting would reach Karen, or how dramatically she would escalate in response. The next morning, I woke to dozens of notifications on my phone. Karen had launched a full-scale social media attack overnight, posting screenshots of private family conversations, many of them edited or taken out of context, claiming that I had organized a smear campaign against her out of jealousy over her new home and successful life. Most shockingly, she had posted childhood photos of Sophie alongside a long, fictitious post about how much she had done for her niece over the years and how I was now dishonoring Sophie's memory by creating family drama instead of allowing everyone to move forward with their lives. Using my deceased daughter as a prop in her narrative of victimhood was the final straw. With hands shaking in rage, I called my attorney. This was no longer just a family matter. This was defamation, harassment, and the exploitation of my daughter's image and memory. Document everything, my lawyer advised. Every post, every message, every call. We can file for a cease and desist order regarding Sophie's images, and if necessary, pursue further legal action. As I hung up the phone, another call came in from Tom. His voice was strained as he spoke. You need to know Karen found out I came to see you. She's not taking it well. She's threatening to empty our accounts if I leave. Can she do that? I asked. Unfortunately, yes. Most of our accounts are joint. I'm headed to the bank now to see what I can protect, but it might get ugly. Be careful, I warned him. Based on what we've seen, there's no telling how far she'll go. What happened next would shock everyone in our family, revealing the true depth of Karen's deception and setting the stage for a reckoning that none of us could have anticipated. The next few days passed in a blur of legal consultations and damage control. My parents had contacted their own attorney regarding Karen's false accusations of financial abuse, while Tom had managed to secure some of his assets by opening a separate account before Karen could empty their joint savings. Karen's social media offensive continued unabated. When family members publicly corrected her lies, she simply blocked them and continued spinning her narrative to anyone who would listen. She had even reached out to a few local parenting bloggers, presenting herself as a victim of family cancellation during her exciting transition to homeownership. What she didn't realize was that her digital footprint was creating a comprehensive record of her deception, one that would prove invaluable later. For days after our family meeting, I received a call from an unfamiliar number. The woman on the other end introduced herself as Diane Miller, the real estate agent who had handled Karen's home purchase. "I'm sorry to bother you," she began, "but I've been seeing some concerning social media posts from your sister and, well, I felt I needed to reach out." "What kind of posts?" I asked, though by now nothing would surprise me. "She's claiming that your parents reneged on a promise to help with her down payment out of spite, forcing her to deplete her retirement savings. But that's simply not true. She made no mention of parental assistance during the entire purchasing process. In fact, she specifically told me she was paying the down payment with an inheritance from your grandmother." I was momentarily confused. "My grandmother is still alive." There was a pause on the other end. "Oh, well, that's concerning." She showed me documentation of a $50,000 inheritance. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. "Ms. Miller, would you be willing to share what documentation she showed you? This is extremely important." "I'd need to check with my broker about the legality of sharing that, but I can tell you it appeared to be a trust disbursement letter with your grandmother's name on it." I remember thinking it was unusual that it wasn't coming from an attorney or bank. After promising to have my attorney contact her office, I immediately called my grandmother's nursing home. The administrator confirmed what I already suspected: no one had access to my grandmother's finances except her designated power of attorney, my father. I called my parents next, my voice tight with barely controlled anger as I relayed what I'd learned. "That's impossible," my father said. "Your grandmother's trust isn't even accessible yet. And it certainly isn't $50,000. "I think Karen may have forged documents to secure her mortgage," I said. Which would explain why she was so desperate for that housewarming to happen on schedule. She needed to establish residence before any verification issues arose. My father was silent for a long moment. "This goes beyond family drama, Melissa. This is bank fraud." "I know," I replied quietly. "And I think it might be time to let the consequences fall where they may." That evening, Tom called again. He sounded exhausted. "Karen's locked me out of the house," he said. "Change the codes on the smart locks. I'm staying at a hotel tonight." "Tom, there's something you should know," I said, and proceeded to tell him about the fake inheritance. His reaction wasn't what I expected. Instead of surprise, there was a long, heavy sigh. "I was afraid it was something like that," he admitted. "The numbers never added up. Our savings wasn't enough for that down payment, but when I asked questions, she just accused me of not trusting her." "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I've already done it," he replied. "I've filed for divorce and reported suspicious financial activity to the bank. I can't be complicit in this, Melissa. Whatever she's done, I can't protect her anymore." The next morning brought another revelation. My cousin Rachel, who worked at the county clerk's office, called with disturbing news. "I wasn't snooping, I swear," she began defensively, but Karen's name flagged in our system during a routine check. "Melissa, she took out a life insurance policy on Sophie 3 months ago." My world tilted. "What? That's not possible. She would have needed my consent as Sophie's mother." "The paperwork shows parental consent," Rachel said carefully. "With your signature." Another forgery. But this one was infinitely more disturbing. Why would Karen take out life insurance on my daughter? And 3 months before the accident? The implication was too horrible to contemplate, yet impossible to ignore. I hung up and immediately called my attorney, who advised me to contact the insurance company and the police immediately. The insurance investigator arrived at my home that afternoon, grim-faced as he reviewed the policy documentation. "This is highly unusual," he confirmed. A $250,000 policy on a minor niece, taken out by an aunt with no insurable interest. And the signature, well, we'll need to verify that with handwriting experts, but it doesn't match other examples of your signature we've seen. Has she tried to collect? I could barely form the words. She filed a claim online the day after your daughter's passing, he said quietly. It was flagged for review due to the timing and relationship. We haven't dispersed any funds. The room seemed to spin around me. The deliberate calculation required to forge my signature, take out a policy on my child, and then file a claim while simultaneously refusing to attend her funeral was beyond comprehension. When the police detective arrived an hour later, the insurance investigator shared his findings. The detective took detailed notes, his expression growing increasingly troubled. We'll need to investigate this thoroughly, he said. Insurance fraud is serious enough, but given the circumstances, well, we have to examine all possibilities. He didn't say what we were both thinking, that the timing of the policy and Sophie's subsequent death raised questions too terrible to voice aloud. While there was no evidence suggesting Karen had any involvement in the accident that killed Sophie, it had clearly been caused by a drunk driver who was already in custody. The financial planning around my daughter's death painted a disturbing picture of my sister's character and intentions. As the detective was leaving, he turned back with one final question. Did your sister know your daughter's schedule that day? That she would be driving alone? A chill ran through me as I realized that yes, Karen had been at my house earlier that week and had overheard Sophie talking about her plans to drive to the art supply store. But surely that didn't mean. I couldn't even finish the thought. News of Karen's life insurance scheme spread quickly through the family. The unified front that had formed during our video call solidified into something stronger, a protective barrier around those Karen had hurt and a determination to ensure there would be consequences for her actions. My parents, devastated by this latest revelation, finally agreed to press charges for the check forgery. Tom moved forward with his divorce proceedings, including detailed documentation of financial discrepancies. The mortgage company and insurance company launched their own fraud investigations. Karen, perhaps sensing the walls closing in, launched a final desperate attempt to control the narrative. She scheduled a family healing session at her house, sending invitations that framed her as the facilitator of reconciliation. When no one accepted, she posted a tearful video claiming she was being abandoned by her family during the most difficult time of her life. But her performance fell flat. Too many people now knew the truth, and her credibility had been irreparably damaged. Former friends and even her few remaining family supporters began distancing themselves as more details emerged about her deceptions. 3 weeks later, I received a call from the detective handling the case. Karen had been arrested on multiple charges: forgery, insurance fraud, mortgage fraud, and identity theft. The evidence against her was overwhelming, with digital footprints confirming her methodical planning. As I hung up the phone, I felt no satisfaction, only a profound sadness for what our family had become. Sophie was still gone. My sister was facing criminal charges. Our parents were grappling with the knowledge that their younger daughter had exploited their granddaughter's death for financial gain. Yet amidst all this darkness, unexpected light had emerged. The family had united in a way I'd never seen before. James and I had found a new understanding through our shared grief. Tom had shown remarkable courage in standing up for what was right, even against his own wife. And most importantly, Sophie's memory had been honored by those who truly loved her, protected from being used as a prop in Karen's manipulations. The road ahead would be long and difficult. There would be trials, both literal and figurative, to endure. But for the first time since that devastating text message calling my daughter's funeral a minor event, I felt that justice might eventually be served, and that perhaps our family could someday heal from these deep wounds. What I couldn't have anticipated was just how that justice would ultimately manifest, or the surprising role my daughter's memory would play in bringing it about. 6 months after Karen's arrest, I stood outside the courthouse, bracing myself for the plea hearing. The criminal case against my sister had progressed steadily, with each investigation uncovering more evidence of her calculated deceptions. Today, she would either accept the plea deal offered by the district attorney or choose to proceed to trial. James had flown in to support me, and my parents stood on my other side, looking older than their years. Tom waited nearby, having become an unexpected ally and almost a brother to me during these difficult months. Sophie's best friend Emma and her parents had also come, representing the community that had rallied around us since Sophie's passing. "Are you ready?" James asked gently, offering his arm. I nodded, though in truth, I wasn't sure anyone could be ready for something like this. As we entered the courtroom, I saw Karen for the first time since before Sophie's funeral. She sat beside her attorney, dressed conservatively, her expression carefully neutral. She didn't look in our direction as we took our seats. The proceedings began with the judge reviewing the charges, multiple counts of forgery, fraud, identity theft, and financial exploitation. The district attorney then outlined the plea agreement they had offered: 5 years in prison with possibility of parole after 3, plus full restitution to all victims and no contact with any family members without their express written consent. When asked how she pleaded, Karen's voice was barely audible as she said, "Guilty, Your Honor." Part of me had expected her to fight, to maintain her narrative of victimhood to the bitter end. Her acceptance of guilt, while practical given the overwhelming evidence, still came as a surprise. The judge then invited victim impact statements. My father spoke first, his voice steady despite the emotion visible in his eyes. "Your Honor, the financial crimes my daughter committed against our family are significant, but they pale in comparison to the emotional damage she has caused. She exploited the death of her niece, our granddaughter, for personal gain. She divided our family during our deepest grief. These are breaches of trust and humanity that cannot be quantified in monetary terms." My mother chose not to speak, too overcome by emotion. Tom spoke briefly about the betrayal of trust in their marriage. When it was my turn, I approached the podium with a letter I had written and rewritten dozens of times, trying to capture the magnitude of what Karen had done. "Your Honor," I began, "I stand before you not just as a victim of financial fraud, but as a mother who lost her only child and then had to fight to protect her memory from exploitation." My sister referred to my daughter's funeral as a minor event compared to her housewarming party. She forged documents to take out life insurance on my daughter without my knowledge. She tried to use Sophie's death to gain sympathy, financial benefits, and attention, all while refusing to attend her funeral. I paused, gathering my strength before continuing. But today, I'm not here to ask for punishment. I'm here to ask for justice, not just legal justice, which these proceedings will address, but moral justice. I want the court to understand that these were not victimless crimes or simple paperwork violations. These actions caused profound harm to a family already devastated by loss. As I returned to my seat, Karen finally looked at me. For a brief moment, I thought I saw something genuine in her eyes, regret, perhaps, or recognition of the damage she had caused. But it vanished so quickly I couldn't be certain it had been there at all. The judge, having reviewed all the evidence and heard our statements, accepted the plea agreement, but added an additional requirement: mandatory psychiatric evaluation and treatment during incarceration. "Ms. Reynolds," the judge addressed Karen, "the court cannot sentence you for moral failings, only for criminal actions. However, I would be remiss not to note that your behavior demonstrates a disturbing lack of empathy and a willingness to exploit tragedy for personal gain. It is my sincere hope that during your incarceration, you will take advantage of mental health services to address these concerning patterns." As the bailiff led Karen away, she glanced back once at our family. In that moment, I realized something important. She would never be the sister I had wanted or needed. No court decision, no time served, no treatment program could transform her into someone capable of genuine remorse or empathy. And accepting that truth, painful as it was, felt like the first step toward my own healing. Outside the courthouse, reporters asked how I felt about the sentence. Rather than dwelling on Karen's punishment, I chose to redirect the conversation. "Today isn't about my sister," I told them. "It's about affirming that truth matters, that exploiting tragedy has consequences, and most importantly, that my daughter Sophie's memory deserves respect." In the year that followed, our family began the slow process of rebuilding. My parents sold their Arizona home and moved closer to me, finding comfort in our shared memories of Sophie and in creating new traditions to honor her. James and I maintained our amicable co-parenting relationship, even without Sophie to parent, supporting each other through grief milestones and celebrating Sophie's life in ways that felt meaningful. Tom finalized his divorce from Karen and eventually moved to another state for a fresh start, though he remained in touch, having become family in ways that transcended his failed marriage. The extended family that had united during the crisis remained connected, our bonds strengthened by the ordeal we had weathered together. As for me, I found purpose in establishing a scholarship foundation in Sophie's name, providing art supplies and education to underprivileged children, combining Sophie's love of art with her compassionate spirit. The first recipients were selected on what would have been her 17th birthday, a day that brought both tears and a sense of her legacy continuing. 2 years after Sophie's death, I received an unexpected package. It had been forwarded from my old address, and the return address was from the women's correctional facility where Karen was serving her sentence. My first instinct was to return it unopened, but something made me pause. Inside was a small, handcrafted wooden box. A note explained that Karen had made it in a prison woodworking program. Within the box was a letter, not of excuses or self-justification, but the first genuine acknowledgement of harm I had ever received from my sister. "I don't expect forgiveness," she had written. "I'm not even asking for it. But I want you to know that through mandatory therapy, I've begun to understand the depth of pain I caused. Sophie deserved better from her aunt. You deserved better from your sister. I can never undo what I've done, but I want you to know I regret it deeply." The letter continued, explaining that she had been diagnosed with a personality disorder and was genuinely committed to treatment. She had instructed her attorney to ensure that all insurance money she had attempted to claim on Sophie went directly to the Scholarship Foundation instead. I didn't respond to the letter. I wasn't ready and might never be. But I placed the wooden box on a shelf beside one of Sophie's art projects, not as a symbol of forgiveness, but as a reminder that, even in the darkest situations, unexpected growth can occur. On the 3rd anniversary of Sophie's death, I visited her grave alone. The pain of her absence hadn't diminished, but I had learned to carry it differently. As I placed sunflowers, her favorites, against her headstone, I felt a sense of peace that had been absent for so long. "You would be proud of the family that came together in your name," I told her. "Not the way any of us would have chosen, but they showed up when it mattered most." A gentle breeze rustled the flowers, and for a moment, I felt Sophie's presence, not in a supernatural way, but in the profound understanding that those we love truly do live on in the impacts they have on others. Sophie's brief life had ultimately brought out the best in so many people, revealing character and courage in unexpected places. Justice had been served, not just through the courts, but through truth prevailing over deception, through a family choosing to honor love and memory over manipulation, through the small acts of remembrance that ensured Sophie would never be forgotten. As I stood to leave, I noticed a young girl and her mother placing flowers at a nearby grave. The girl was carefully arranging sunflowers, just as Sophie used to do. Some coincidences feel like messages from beyond, reminders that life continues in cycles of loss and renewal. I smiled at the mother, who nodded in the silent understanding that passes between those who have known grief. And in that moment, I felt the first real stirrings of what might someday become forgiveness, not for Karen's sake, but for my own and for the future that still lay ahead. Before I end this story, I want to sincerely thank you for listening. Sharing this experience has been part of my healing journey, and knowing that Sophie's story might help others navigate their own family conflicts means her life continues to have impact. If you found meaning in this account of betrayal, justice, and eventual healing, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more authentic life stories. I'd also love to hear in the comments if you've ever experienced family karma or justice in your own life. Have you witnessed someone's true character being revealed in a crisis? How did you handle family betrayal? Your engagement means the world to me, and I read every comment. Thank you for being part of my healing journey, and I hope that wherever you are in your own story, you find the strength to honor your truth and seek the justice and peace you deserve.